All right, Shabbosai, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Start by thanking our sponsors, our Talmud Torah sponsors, Yona Shushie Ehrenfeld, for dedicating all the shiurim and drushos this month in memory of their grandfather, Yosef ben Shmuel Aron. To thank Marc Karstaedt, our Talmud Torah sponsor, for dedicating the shiurim drushos this month in memory of his mother, Chana Bat Shraggai. To thank our Daf Yomi sponsors, Richard and Judy Noodleman, in honor of their granddaughter, Nechama Gittel's Bas Mitzvah, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov Mishpacha, and by the Goldstein family, wishing Howard Goldstein a happy birthday. Mazel Tov, Howard, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov, Adneve Esrim Shanim Tovos. Beautiful. Beautiful. Very special when that's what a mishpacha gives to a patriarch for a birthday present. Truly beautiful. Howard Zachisa. All right, and of course we dedicate our learning Li'ilui Nishmos, the 45 Kiddushim who perished in Meron on Lag BaOmer, and as the Levayos continue into today, as I mentioned before, today being a national day of mourning in Eretz Yisrael, it behooves us to dedicate our Torah, our Talmud Torah, Li'ilui Nishmas, some for the benefit of their neshamas, for the benefit of the mishpachos who have been left behind, and for the benefit of Klal Yisrael. And both say, again, as I mentioned before, we said that Tehillim after davening. Today is a national day of mourning, and it's important. I don't know practically how that plays out, what that means in Israel, besides the flags being lowered, I'm sure, and manifests in a variety of ways. But it's important to understand that what it means, as I mentioned yesterday, even though we are still here, hopefully not for too much longer, but we're still here, we are part of Am Yisrael and part of Eretz Yisrael. So it behooves us, even though today is a Sunday, and a Sunday, of course, is a wonderful day for relaxation and recreation, but it's very important for us to take a little bit of time out today also to be with our brethren in Eretz Yisrael. So whether it's that you take a little bit additional time to be able to learn today, a little bit of an opportunity to recite some kapitel of Tehillim, to daven a little bit more, to do some acts of chesed, to give tzedakah, whatever it is, but make sure over the course of the day, as Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael is mourning this terrible churban, we 6,000 miles away must mourn together. Because again, it's not their loss, it's our loss. Whether we're separated by geography or whether we're separated sometimes by religious divides, we are all one Am, we are all one nation, all one heart. We should be there for each other in times of simcha and in times of tsar. So we'll say, with that, let us begin. So we have a beautiful daf ahead of us today. We actually got up to the top of Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph yesterday. We actually did something pretty amazing yesterday in the annals of Daf Yomi history. I got absolutely no recognition for it, but we went from Yud Tes Amud Beis to Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph over the course of one shir, which Baruch Hashem. But we're actually going to go back and let's take a look. Let's pick up from the Braisa on the bottom of Chaf Amud Beis. So starting 3 lines up from the bottom. So we already learned this yesterday a little bit, but let's actually pick up from this Braisa. So Tana Rabbanan, Shalosh kolos holchim misofa odlam va'ad sofo. There are 3 sounds which could be heard from one end of the earth to the other. And what are they? Ve'eluhein, kol galgal chama, the sun. Remember, we saw this in yesterday's Gemara. Kol galgal chama means the sun, the sound of the movement of the sun. Remember again, the Gemara said that the movement of the sun sounds like the sawing, right? The sawing of a carpenter through a piece of wood. So too again, the sun cuts through the horizon as it moves forward. Oh, you know what? I forgot. Sorry. Okay. I should remember to do these things, but okay. So the Gemara says, so shalosh kolos holchim misofa olam va'ad sofo. 3 kolos move from one end of the earth could be heard. So kol galgal chama, the sound of the sun cutting through the sky. The kol hamona shel Romi, the sounds of the throngs of Rome. The kol neshama sheyotze min haguf, and the sound of a neshama when it leaves the body. V'yesh omrim af leida, some say even the sound of birth. Top of Chaf Aleph. V'yesh omrim af redia, and some say even the sound of rain. Rashi says over here, Ridia is Malach Hamamuna ala Shakas Haaretz. This is the Malach who's in charge of watering the earth. So you could hear the sound of rain could be heard from one end of the earth to the other. Both say this is incredible. Ubay Rabbanon Rachame an Neshama. the Rabbanan, the Chazal davened, that ultimately, again, Anashama b'shash yotzei min haguf ubatluha. Interestingly enough, the rabbis davened that the sound of the neshama leaving the body should not be heard. Should not be heard. Now, both say, if you think about these things, it's actually quite amazing. What is, obviously, a Gemara like this is coming to advance some type of metaphorical message as well. So think about this for just a moment. What's the sound of the movement of the sun? That's the passage of time. We'll say one of the most profound things that occurs in this world is the passage of time, right? And the sound of the passage of time is so deafening. It's so deafening because every moment that goes by can never be retrieved. And every moment that goes by can never be reclaimed. That sound of passage of time ultimately, again, can be heard from one end of the earth to the other. Next, Kalamona Shoro. You both say Rome represents anti-Semitism. Rome represents, right, Klali Esav Sone Es Yaakov, the overwhelming nature of the hatred that exists towards Klal Yisrael in this world is deafening and overwhelming. Kol neshama b'shash yotzei min haguf, death. Both say the knowledge that life comes to an end, right? And the knowledge that life, we see God this all the time, that life is not an infinite renewable resource, but instead that life is a finite, non-renewable resource. That knowledge, that reality is deafening. It's overwhelming. The Gemara says, Leida, right? The idea that we come into this world, the sound of birth. A person is only born if they have a mission. A person is only born if they have a destiny. A person only comes into this world if they have something to do and something to contribute. That knowledge that I am here for a reason is heard from one end of the earth to the other. Rain, we'll say, so rain, what's rain? Rain is parnasa. The knowledge that my parnasa ultimately comes from the Ribbon Shalom, that it's true. I have to put in my effort. I absolutely have to put in my effort. I have to put in my ishtadlus. But at the end of the day, my effort is only meaningful if it is blessed by the Ribbon Shalom. So we'll say, this is what it means when these sounds are heard from one end of the earth to the other. That these are the things of which we must be constantly aware. I must be aware of the passage of time, because if I'm aware that every second that goes by I cannot reclaim, that'll get me to use my time better. I must be aware of Esav son es Yaakov, of anti-Semitism. I'll say, why? Why to walk around like everybody hates me? No, because especially as those of us who live in the Gullus, we always have to be aware that we are foreigners in a foreign land. And at the end of the day, we, Baruch Hashem, we are privileged to be here, and we are privileged, wherever we've lived throughout the centuries, to be hosted by many nations. But we should never delude ourselves into thinking that the nations of the world love us. The sound of death. I both say the knowledge that death comes for us all. Some of us will be zocheh to live longer lives. Some of us only will be given a short amount of years. But at the end of the day, death comes for all. And the notion that life ends has to energize us to live more purposefully. Leida, I both say the idea, life, I have a mission. I have a mission. What's my mission? Figure out what my mission is. What am I supposed to accomplish? Rain, the parnasa comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So I'll say, what's the pshat that Chazal davened for the sound of the neshama leaving the body to be taken away? Because I will say, can you imagine if that sound was actually heard? Chazal davened, if people live with a constant preoccupation of death, that could ultimately, again, lead to undermining productivity in life. So it's almost as if Chazal said, it used to be that the knowledge of death lived on the frontal lobe, right? The knowledge of death was constantly part of my consciousness. It was heard, which could be very powerful, but apparently Chazal also felt that it could potentially be debilitating, or they saw that it was debilitating. So they davened ultimately again for that sound to be no longer heard in this world. Incredible. Tanya Kavase de Reb Shila. So we'll say, remember again, this whole discussion is such incredible Gemara. This whole discussion is rooted in a machlokas between Rav and Rabbi Shila about the definition of what? Remember? Kriyas HaGever. Right? When the Mishnah said that on a normal day they would do Trumas Hadeshin by Kriyas HaGever, what does that mean? So Rav said Kriyas HaGever is talking about a guy, a person. Right? A person. His name was Gavini, we saw in yesterday's daf. Right? So he was the individual, was the crier who woke everybody up. So Rav says it's a person. Rabbi Shila said no, it refers to the rooster. So the Gemara says that there is a brayso that supports Rabbi Shila. If someone travels in the morning before Kriyas HaGever, which I will say in this context means before the crow of the rooster, Damo Berosho. He is responsible ultimately again for his own death. I will say this is part of the motif that there are mazikin, there are dangerous forces. There are dangerous forces which exist in the world at night, and therefore a person should not go ahead and travel by night. So if you travel before the rooster crows, then at the end of the day, Damo Berosho. Rabbi Yoshia Omer, Ad Sheyishna. Rabbi Yoshia says you really shouldn't leave until the rooster crows twice. The Yeshon Ad Sheyashlish. Others say you have the rooster to crow 3 times. What kind of rooster they're talking about? Betarnagol Beinoni. Say, even in the rooster chevra, right? There's reasoned roosters, right? They crow very early. Then there is the lazy roosters, they crow late. When we speak about that you shouldn't leave, it's talking about a rooster Beinoni. Right? We'll say in life in general, it's always good to be a middle of the road kind of person, middle of the road kind of rooster. So when the rooster Beinoni rooster crows, that's when you should go. So we'll say, so again, leaving aside the halachas and traveling, this brayso clearly supports Rabbi Shila's interpretation that gever, right, that kriyas ha-gever, ultimately again refers to the crowing of the rooster. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Marav, so listen to this. So now, we'll say that's the machlokes. Now, obviously, we know that historically, in the Beis Hamikdash, there was a crier. I don't know if I'm using the right word, crier, but you understand there was an announcer, right? I mentioned yesterday, the veker, right? Like every yeshiva has the veker, the guy who goes around and wakes up everyone. So the Beis Hamikdash had someone who was responsible for this as well. So it could very well be that Kriyas HaGever means different things in different places, but at least in our Mishnah, Kriyas HaGever absolutely means the individual who was called Gavini, or Gani. I keep saying Gavini. Was it Gavini or Ganivi? Gavini, right? So Gavini, ultimately again, that was the original guy's name, and then the office became known by that name as well. So the Gemara goes weiter. We'll say this is so beautiful. The Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Marav, B'shal sheisra olin l'regel, omdin sefufim mishtachavim ravachin. We'll say this is truly beautiful. So the Rabbi Yehuda says the name of Rav. When Klal Yisrael would come up for Aliyah l'regel, we'll say you have to imagine this scene. Imagine this scene. They were coming up for Aliyah l'regel, Pesach Shavuos Sukkos, omdin sefufim. They would stand packed in together, umishtachavim revakim. But when they would bow down, there was space for everyone. Now, both say, if I'll tell you something very interesting, the Gemara says, v'nimshach. So, if you look at Rashi for just a moment, mishtachavim revakim, it's right across in Rashi. Kishem mishtachavim v'noflim v'nasa lahem neis, when they would prostrate themselves and bow down, a miracle would happen. V'hamakom marchiv ad sheyesh beinehem arba amos. So we'll say, when they were standing up in the mikdash, they were packed in like sardines. But then when they would go ahead and bow down, there was enough space for every single person. Why? Now look what Rashi says. Shelo yishma ish vidui shel chavero shelo yikalei. Now, according to Rashi, the reason for this miracle was that when remember, you would recite vidui when you were prostrating yourselves. And what's going to happen? Vidui, I will say, is we think about vidui as Hashamnu Baganu. That's true. But real vidui is confession of what? Of what? Of your own Averis. Right? Not just Hashamnu Baganu. I spoke Lashon Hara, I ate non-kosher, right? Whatever your Averis are. So we'll say, what's the problem? The problem is, if we're all standing next to each other, then what? I'm going to be inhibited. I don't want to confess my Averis in earshot of you. By the way, I'm actually not allowed to confess my Averis, right? The idea that Rambam brings in Hilchos Tshuva, when you confess your Averis, that is a private experience between you and the Ribono Shel Olam. So Rashi says the point of the miracle was allow for personal vidui, a personal confession. Now, what's unique about this Rashi? We'll say, when are you confessing your Averis? No one wants to answer this question. Right? So we'll say, with Pashas, hopefully I'm confessing my Averis every day. I mean, if I did them. But really, that's the Avodah of Yom Kippur. Yet, the Gemara says, when did this miracle occur? Regalim, where there's no din of vidui, which is really quite interesting. There's a whole machlokes over here. There are different girsos of the Gemara as well. Exactly when this miracle occurred. Because remember again, even on the Yom Tovim, was there a din of prostration? Not a din of prostration. Yom Kippur, there was for sure a din of prostration. I will say, remember again, even aside for vidui, when are we prostrating ourselves on Yom Kippur? We do this to this very day. Also remember again, to this very day we reenact this in our shuls, even outside of the Beis Hamikdash. So it's interesting, prostration played a major role in the Beis Hamikdash, dafka on Yom Kippur. But it's interesting that the Gemara understands the miracle to be occurring during the regalim. Okay, just something to think about, but I just want to point out that according to Rashi, the real miracle took place on Yom Kippur, so that everybody should be able to prostrate and recite their vidui in private. The Gemara says, listen to this. And I both say this is actually incredible. There was such an incredible number of people who came to the Beis Hamikdash that literally the Jews encircled the entire Beis Hamikdash. So we'll say actually they were inside of the walls of the Beis Hamikdash, and what they did is they kind of extended out of Ezras Yisrael. They extended out of Ezras Yisrael. Because also remember again, we saw in our diagram, we're not going to go into the diagram today, but we saw that the way you would remember, if you're coming in the east entrance of the Beis Hamikdash, you keep going through what we call the Ezras Nashim, you hit a gate. The one gate on the eastern side, which was called a little bit of the Chazar, the one gate on the eastern side, Shar Nikanor. Excellent. You'd walk into Shar Nikanor, the 11 Amos after Shar Nikanor were called Ezras Yisrael. During the Yom Tovim, there were so many Jews there. I will say it's actually, if you think about it, it's very haunting to learn this Gemara in light of the events, right? The mass gatherings of Lag BaOmer and Meron. But it's incredible. You see that the Jews came into the Beis Hamikdash, and there were so many people there that they actually crowded around the Beis Hamikdash. So obviously, that was very soothing. Thank you. Right. So ultimately, again, they would go ahead and crowd around the Beis Hamikdash to the point that they would even be behind the Kodesh. So if you can imagine, they filled the entire perimeter of the Beis Hamikdash, not going where the Mizbeach was, not going where the Tabos were. So if you could, in your mind, remember the image of the Beis Hamikdash, I'll just show it to you very quickly. I thought I had it here. Too many papers. Okay, so what says, if you can imagine, just if you were talking about over here, remember again, they're coming in, this is the eastern gate, Shar Nikanor. Klal Yisrael, regular Yisrael are able to go in this narrow rectangle. During the times of the regalim, they actually would fill out this entire space, again, along the perimeter of the wall. And then the 11 Amos behind the Kodesh HaKadoshim is what we're referring to right over here. These 11 Amos, and behind it, they would come along this entire perimeter. Not coming again in this area, because this is where the Kohanim were doing their Avodah, but along the entire perimeter. And the Gemara is saying, even behind the 11 Amos, ultimately again, behind the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says, good. My kamar, hachi kamar. Afa pishanim shakan asara ama chori beis hakapores omdim tzufufim kim mishtachim mevachin. So we'll say the miracle was that even though they were panned out, right, there was so much extra room, they panned out past the Ezras Nashim into the Ezras Yisrael, and even surrounding the perimeter of the Beis Hamikdash. When they stood, they were packed in, but when they bowed down, there was room for everyone. And I both say, this is one of the 10 miracles that was done in the Beis Hamikdash. So we're going to see now, we're going to go through the 10 miracles. That was, I promised you, an incredible daf. And the Meretz Hashem, now we're going to go through the 10 miracles of the Beis Hamikdash. But I'm going to come back, because I just want to get through a little bit more Gemara. There's a beautiful, beautiful idea about this particular miracle of Omdim Tzivuvim Mishtachavim Revachim. We'll get to it in just a moment. This nan, Asara Nisim Nasu Beis Hamikdash. There are 10 miracles which were performed in the Beis Hamikdash. Number 1, Lo Epila Isha Mereach Basar Hekdish. A woman never miscarried from smelling the sacrificial meat. Now, Rashi points out, what does this mean? When a woman is pregnant, so she develops cravings. So again, let's say a woman is coming to Yerushalayim, she's coming to the Beis Hamikdash, and what happens? You smell the burning meat to the car. We'll say, you have to imagine the aroma coming to the Beis Hamikdash must have been incredible. Right? What does it smell like? It smells like a barbecue, right? It's mamish, like a national barbecue. It's incredible. So what could happen? A pregnant woman could develop cravings. And again, if a pregnant woman develops cravings and those cravings are not fulfilled, it could be dangerous to her. So again, it never happened that a pregnant woman developed a dangerous craving from the meat of Kachim. Sacrificial meat never went putrid. Right? It never went putrid. A fly was never found in the butcher chamber, which Rabbi says is an incredible miracle. There was never a situation where the Kohen Gadol became a Balkari, had a seminal mission on the night of Yom Kippur. It never happened that there was some kind of disqualification in the barley which was harvested for the Omer. Remember again, we harvest barley. We remember again, the carbon omer is offered up on the second day of Pesach. We go out the night of the second day of Pesach to harvest that barley. And I remember, they don't harvest a lot of barley. They only harvest what they need. Which means that if you were to bring that barley to the Beis HaMikdash, and then something were to happen to the barley, you would be out of luck for the carbon omer, at least temporarily. So a miracle happened. There was never a psul. There was never ultimately, I remember, barley is also first starting to ripen that time. So there's not an abundance of barley. So they would go, harvest what they needed, come back to the Beis HaMikdash. If there was some type of psul, that ultimately, again, could significantly delay the offering of the carbon omer. The Gemara says, never happened. If you look at Rashi, Rashi says over here, v'lo nimtza psul ba'omer, shim yerabo psul, because if some disqualification would happen to the barley, ein acher lahavi tachtov. There is no other barley to offer. Shu niktzar belel matzah yamtiv, vein marben liktzar elakafi ashir. We'll say again, they didn't harvest a lot of barley. They only harvested what they needed. So if there was a psul, if there was some type of disqualification, you would mamish be out of luck with the carbon. Next, the Gemara goes on, ubishtei alechem. Similarly, again, there was never a psul n'shtei alechem. That's the loaf offering of Shavuos. Ubelechem aponim. Nor was there ever a psul lechem aponim. Omdim tzefuvim mishtachavim revachim. They would stand, when they were packed in by the regalim, they would stand shoulder to shoulder, but they would bow down and there was room for everyone. V'lo hizik nachash v'aka b'Yerushalayim me'olam. And no one was ever harmed by a snake or a scorpion in Yerushalayim. So isn't that incredible? V'lo amar adam lechavero sarli hamakom sha'alim b'Yerushalayim. And I will say, because on the regalim, you had such a convergence of people in Yerushalayim, no one ever said sarli hamakom. Right? No one ever said, there's not enough space for me to go ahead and find a place to stay or find a place to eat. Rashi points out, sarli hamakom mizonosai dichukim dirasi dichuka. No one ever said, I can't get a reservation in a restaurant in Yerushalayim, right? And no one ever said, I can't find a place to stay. But I want to tell you something amazing. The Chassam Sofer comments on this Gemara, and he says, how could that be? Right? Think about this for just a moment. Just logistically, how can that be? How could Yerushalayim go ahead and accommodate everyone? I'm saying, so you could say, what's the answer? It's a miracle. Okay. Remember again, this is the list. The Asara Nisim. We'll say the Chassam Sofer says something so beautiful. The Chassam Sofer says, sometimes there wasn't a place to stay for everyone. And sometimes there wasn't enough food. What was the miracle? V'lo amar adam sarli hamakom. The miracle was no one complained. That was the miracle. No one complained. Now, we'll say, so first of all, it's a miracle for Jews not to complain. That's Aleph, right? We'll say, we're thinking about this just what's the beauty of it? What's the miracle? The miracle, I will say, you ever sometimes with, maybe you have a family gathering, or maybe it's where it's uncomfortable, it's squishy, but when you're with people who you love, you really don't care. When you're with people who you love, the experience itself is so beautiful and so meaningful that the physical discomfort really does not erode the experience. The Chassam Sofer says, the regalim, we're going to have this in Eretz Hashem very soon again. And can you imagine that scene of all of us coming together to Yerushalayim? The traffic is going to be horrendous, right? And the congestion, it is going to be overwhelming. And if you don't have a place to stay, I think I saw Jerry on here. I'm staying by Jerry in Eretz Hashem, right? But if you don't have a place to stay or you don't have somewhere to go, it's going to be a to-do. I will say, but who doesn't want to get stuck in that traffic? Can you imagine what that is? Yeah, you've got to pack up the car early Erev Yom Tiv, right? It's a half-hour trip, but we're leaving ourselves 6 hours to get there. Why? Because the streets are going to be, I will say, is anyone going to complain about that traffic? Is anyone going to complain? Or when again you can't get a reservation in a restaurant in Yerushalayim, right? Is anyone going to complain? V'lo amar adam tzarli hamakom sha'alim b'Yerushalayim. The Chasam Sofer says that's the miracle, because it was so great to be with your people. It was so great to be with Am Yisrael. It was so great ultimately to be part of this incredible, magnificent national endeavor that no one complained. That was the miracle. That's Chasam Sofer. Others say no. Kipshuta kimashmo. The miracle was somehow there was enough space for everyone. Okay, good. So the Gemara says, interesting, a pasuk b'meitach. Now, we'll say, remember again, the Gemara just gave a list of 10 miracles which occurred. Now, the Gemara said, these are 10 miracles which occurred in Yerushalayim. But in reality, 10 miracles that occurred in the Mikdash. The first 8 were in the Mikdash. The last 2 were in Yerushalayim, right? Remember again, miracles 9 and 10 is there was never a snake or a scorpion in Yerushalayim. And number 10 was V'lo amar adam sali amakom. Person never said, there is not enough space for me. So you told me 10 miracles in the Mikdash, but in reality you only listed 8 in the Mikdash and 2 in Yerushalayim. To which the Gemara says, Ika tarti achrenaisa Mikdash. There are actually 2 other miracles in the base of Mikdash. What are they? Disanyo me'olam lo kibu gishamim eisha atzei ma'aracha. So we'll say, so first of all, miracle. Right, another miracle was the rain never extinguished the fire of the Mizbeach. The rain never extinguished the fire of the Mizbeach. Furthermore, again, the smoke which came up from the Ma'aracha, right? The smoke that came up from the Mizbeach rose in a straight pillar. And no matter how strong the wind was, at the end of the day, nothing dissipated the column of smoke. So the Gemara says, V'suleka, are there no other miracles? V'ha'avatanya Reb Shmaya, Reb Shmaya Mekol Nevo, he's Reb Shmaya from Kol Nevo, that's the name of his place. Shivrei Klei Cheres Nivla'in Bimkoman. We'll say this is incredible, another miracle. So we'll say, so what the Gemara just did was took out the 2 last miracles of snakes and scorpions in Yerushalayim, and lo amar adam tzarli amakom, and replaced them with another 2. The other 2 were again that there was the rain never extinguished the fire in the Mizbeach, and the pillar of smoke which rose from the Mizbeach went up in a straight pillar. But I just want to point out, all of these miracles have incredible metaphorical significance, because remember again, the Ribono Shel Olam never does purposeful miracles. There are either utilitarian miracles necessary to remedy some type of immediate need, like Kriyas Yamsuf, or there are message miracles, which are miracles done for the purpose of conveying to us some type of dramatic message. So again, this is beyond the scope of our shir today, but we'll find the opportunity. Maybe each of these miracles, actually Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau, Shlita in his Perush and Pirkei Avos, this is a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos as well. Asar Nisum Nasul Avasim Beis HaMikdash has actually a beautiful metaphorical significance. He gives beautiful explanations, and we'll find the time to Meretz Hashem do it. So the Gemara goes weiter. Are these the only miracles? There are other miracles. So the Gemara says, Shmaya says, Shivrei Klei Cheres Nivlan Bimkoman. We'll say, remember again, when the Kohanim would eat of the Karbanos, they would eat their karbanos in earthenware utensils. Now, what would you do with the earthenware utensils when you finish eating the karban? You had to smash them, because there was nothing you could do with them. Because remember, earthenware absorbs, but the absorptions cannot be extracted. So when the Kohanim would finish eating their karbanos, they would literally smash the earthenware utensils. So we'll say, Kohanim eat a lot of karbanos. So what happens to all of the shards? Miraculously, they were absorbed in place. Avam Rabbaye, in the Beis Hamikdash itself, Avam Rabbaye said, "Mora v'nosa v'dishum zecha panimi v'dishun amenora nevlatin bimkoman." Abaye says another miracle that literally the crop and the feathers of the ola sa'of, the bird ola, were absorbed in place. The dishun, right, the ashes of the mizbeach and of the menorah, when they were placed on the ground, were absorbed in place. To which the Gemara says, well, there's a lot of other miracles. To which the Gemara says, "Psulei." So now what the Gemara is going to do is try to collapse the original list a little bit. Because remember again, the way the Mishnah started was, there are 10 miracles which happened in the Beis HaMikdash. So we're kind of locked in to that number 10. What the Gemara now is going to do is as follows. The Gemara is going to go ahead and say, the 3 miracles which dealt ultimately again with psulim. Or as the Gemara said, there was never a psul in the Omer. There was never a psul in the Shtei HaLechem, and there was never a psul in the Lechem HaPonim. Let's make those 3 into one. Right? We'll call those, there was never a psul in the Beis HaMikdash miracles. All right? We could collapse it into one. Chashvinu bechad. apik tray, va'ili tray, then you could include these other two miracles as well. Ihachi, if that's the case, beluin nami tray chashvinu. If that's the case, then Rabbi say again, all of these miracles about absorption, right? The absorption of the kli chares, the absorption by the bird offering, the absorption of the ash. You could also go ahead and collapse that into one. So if that's the case, chasra lahu, then you're missing one miracle. You see, there is another miracle. So what's the other miracle? There was an incredible miracle with lechem apanim. What was the miracle? Siluko kisiduro. Rabbi said the miracle of the lechem apanim was that just like it was put on fresh, it was removed fresh as well. When it was put on, it was hot, and when it was removed, it was hot. Shneimar lashum lechem chom biyom hilakcho. V'sulakar, the other miracles. So that perhaps that's miracle number 10. Lechem aponim, it was put on hot, it was removed hot. Are there no other miracles? V'amar Levi, davar zeh mesoras biyadenu me'avosenu. There is a Masorah that we have. Makom Aron ina min amid. This is incredible. If you look at the dimensions of the Kodesh HaKadoshim and the dimensions of the Ark of the Aron, it doesn't work. The Ark does not fit inside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. To which the Gemara explains, it's very simple. Aron ina min amida. The Aron somehow miraculously did not take up space. Didn't take up space. So that's another miracle. Furthermore, again, the Gemara says, Shmuel, Kruvim b'neis hayu omdim. The Kruvim themselves, I will say, which were the angelic-like figures, perched on top of the Aron, also were suspended miraculously, right? They also didn't take up space. So the Gemara says, so this is two more miracles. Why aren't they reckoned as part of this list? To which the Gemara says, no. Nisi dibrai kachashiv, nisi degavai lo kachashiv. Both said, this is actually very interesting. The list only included miracles that were on the outside of the mikdash, not miracles that occurred in the interior of the mikdash. So we'll say interesting distinction here. So we'll say therefore again, the Aron and the Kruvim, these were nisim on the inside, they're not included in this. We'll say, so it turns out, when the Mishnah says Asara nisim, these are 10 miracles which occurred on the outside of the mikdash, which were visible. But there are many more miracles which occurred on the interior of the mikdash, which were not visible, therefore were not included. One second. We'll say the lechem apanim was kept on what? On the shulchan. On the shulchan. And where was the shulchan kept? In the inside of the mikdash, right in the kodesh. So if that's the case, that's also called an interior miracle. If that's the case, why is it included in the list? To which the Gemara says, "Yihachi lechem apanim nami nisi degavayhu, lechem apanim nisi debrayhu." No, in reality, I will say, this is so beautiful. The miracle of the lechem apanim was actually an exterior miracle. Why? Both say this is beautiful. Damrei Shlakish, my dichsiv ala shulchan atar. Both say, why does the pasuk say that you shall place the lechem on the shulchan hatahar? Right? You should place the lechem apanim on the shulchan that is tar. Tar michlashu tameh. We'll say, what does that mean? Now, interesting enough, what we can infer from that is that perhaps the shulchan, Rashi says, is mekabel tumah. Are you trying to tell me that the shulchan is mekabel tumah? Well, that's not true. The shulchan is not mekabel tumah. Why not? I will say, Amud Beis, kli eitz ha'asuin lenachesu. The shulchan, I will say, is a wooden utensil that is meant to remain stationary. V'chol kli eitz ha'asuin lenaches ina mekabel tumah. And any wooden utensil that is meant to remain stationary is not makabel tumah. Now, both say, I want to point out something very interesting over here. So Rashi gives the whole limud, how we know that a stationary wood utensil is not makabel tumah. Now, both say what's very unique over here is that the shulchan is called a wooden utensil, even though what? It's coated with gold. So we'll say, remember again, when it comes to, let's say, we learned some Zara, clay kunya, utensils that are coated with some type of exterior coating. Generally, the utensil takes on the identity of the exterior coating. By the shulchan, it's different because the Torah itself calls the shulchan eitz. So therefore, even though the shulchan is coated in gold, it's covered in gold, l'maaseh it is considered to be a kli eitz. So a wooden utensil that is meant to remain stationary is not mekabel tumah. Well, if that's the case, then why does the Torah have to refer to the shulchan as what was the lashon ala shulchan hatar? What's going on over here? To which the Gemara says, this is incredible. The Gemara says, "V'kol kliyetzu asay nachis." Any wooden utensil that is meant to remain stationary, eino makabel tumah. It's not makabel tumah. V'chol teis b'fnei tumah. Furthermore, could serve as a barrier to the tumah. So we'll say, so therefore, why does the Torah have to refer to the Shulchan Atar? This is incredible. Elu melamed shemak bianos oler regam. Because we'll see from here that the Shulchan wasn't stationary. Rather, again, we'll say, when was the Shulchan moved? This is so incredibly beautiful. When was the Shulchan moved? The Shulchan was moved for the Olei Regalim, for those who came up on the Yomim Tovim. The Omen, the Kohanim, will say, listen, imagine this image. The Kohanim would bring out the Shulchan to the Olei Regalim. Now, we'll say, now, what I told you before makes a lot of sense. Where were the Olei Regalim? Right? Where were the pilgrims during the times of the Regalim? Remember, again, we'll say, they went past Ezras Yisrael. They entered in through Shar Nikanor. They occupied the area, ultimately, again, of the 11 Amos. And then they also circled the entire interior of the Azara. So I will say, which tells you what the Kohanim would, it's incredible. Imagine the scene. The Kohanim would bring the Shulchan out of the Mikdash. And they would say to Klal Yisrael, they would say, Va'omru lahen, Ru'uchi baschem lefnei hamakom. See how much HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves you. Shesiluko kisiduro. That ultimately, again, the loaves remain fresh, they were put on hot, and they were removed hot. Shneimar, Losum lechem chom biyom hilakcho. To go ahead and place right, that the bread is warm on the day it was removed, just like the day it was placed. So both say, see, that's why it calls the Shulchan Atar. Why? Because technically speaking, the Shulchan was Mekabel Tumah. In fact, Rabbi say, we know that after the Regalim, what would they do with the Shulchan? We know this. What would they do with the Shulchan? They would immerse it in the mikvah. Because what were they concerned about? They were concerned that people who were tamei inadvertently touched it. So they would actually immerse. So we'll say this is another. So again, the point over here is this is another miracle that the lechem hapanim remained fresh. Also, I just point out to you why was this the thing that they showed Klal Yisrael? Right at the end of the day, they said, "Ru'uchi basim l'fnei hamakom." See how much Kadosh Baruch Hu loves you. The lechem hapanim remains fresh. We'll say, why is the freshness of the lechem hapanim demonstrative of the unending love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has for Klal Yisrael? Because let's remember again, what does lechem represent? What does lechem represent? The lechem represents parnasa. I will say, what are all of us preoccupied with? Or like, unless you're independently wealthy, what are all of us preoccupied with? We're all preoccupied with parnasa. I will say the freshness of the lechem hapanim was a reminder that the Ribono Shel Olam is an ever-present force in our parnasa. That although we have to go ahead and put in ishtadlus, we have to put in a lot of ishtadlus, we have to work very hard to earn our daily bread, the freshness of that bread, the Ribono Shel Olam is constantly present in my bread. I don't have to earn my parnasa by myself. The Ribono Shel Olam is there with me every step of the way. Yes, it's b'zeas apecha tochal lechem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you're only going to eat bread, you're only going to earn a parnasa through the sweat of your brow, but lest you think you have to go at it alone. HaKadosh Baruch Hu keeps the bread fresh. He is there with you every step of the way. Beautiful. V'suleka, are there no other miracles? We'll say there are plenty of miracles. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakol niyeh b'dvaro. There are plenty of miracles. V'amar Rav Oshia b'shashya ben Shlomo beis hamikdash nata bal kol minei megadim shazah. We'll see, this is incredible. When Shlomo built the beis hamikdash, he planted golden trees and golden vines. And what did they do? Vayumosin perosen bizmanon. This is incredible. And the golden trees and the golden vines would yield golden fruit. Golden fruit. And then when the wind would blow, noshrin, the fruit would fall off the tree, the grapes would fall off the vine. Shnei amar, yirash kalavanon piryo. Literally again, the rustle, right? The rustle will go in and cause the fruit to come off. And when our enemies came into the Beis Hamikdash, yavash, these golden trees and these golden vines dried up. Shnei amar, uparach levanon umlal. V'asir HaKadosh Baruch Hu lachziran. And also when Mashiach comes, the golden trees of Shlomo and the golden vines of Shlomo are going to come back into blossom. Shnei amar, parach tifrach v'sagal avgilas ra'anan kavod halavanon nasan la. Both incredible. So why aren't these included as well? And both I just point out, by the way, not for now, there's a whole discussion. You're not allowed to plant trees on the Har HaBayis. So both say, by the way, if you ever have the schos to go ahead and go on the Harabayis, right? With the proper preparations and with the proper tour, you'll notice something amazing. There's a ridiculous number of trees planted on Harabayis. So understand that is a shtach by the Waqf. Right, we'll say, in other words, that unfortunately sometimes our antagonists understand our halachas as well. There's a premeditated effort to plant trees on the Harabayis, because we don't plant trees on the Harabayis. We'll say it's incredible. It looks beautiful. You look at it, there's so much green, right? There are no trees in the rest of Yerushalayim, right? But amazing enough, on the Harabayis, there's such a concentration of trees. That is done to spiritually repudiate our claim. We do not plant trees on the Harabayis for one simple reason, out of a concern for Asherah. Remember again, the Asherah tree was in prominence from Avodah Zarah. So there's a whole discussion in the Rishonim, ultimately about how Shlomo Melech was able to plant things on the Harabayis. Okay, not for now, just pointing out. So the Gemara says, so you see these miracles, why don't you include the golden trees, the golden vines? To which the Gemara says, we'll say first wide line, Nisi dikavi lo kachashiv. So we'll say, interesting enough, the Gemara says, miracles that were established, that were fixed in place, we don't count. We don't count. We'll say, Rashi says, dikavi kavuim va'omdin tamid bimkoman. Miracles which were kind of embedded in place and happened every day, we don't count those as the list. So we'll say, which by the way is such an incredible musar. In general, miracles which occur every single day, we generally don't count as miracles, even though they are no less miraculous than the episodic miracles. Human nature is such that those things that you see every single day become part of nature and lose their miraculous identity, even though they are no less miraculous, again, as I mentioned, than the episodic miracles of life. So, isn't this incredible? So, isn't this amazing? No. We don't count the golden trees and the golden vines of Shlomo. Because at the end of the day, Nisi Dikavi, they're always there. They're always there. And therefore, we're only counting the episodic miracles. To which the Gemara says, well, Hasha da Asas Lahachi. Now that you said that, Aron ukruvim nami nisi dikvininu. Ultimately, again, the Aron and the Kruvim also aren't counted in the list because they are nisi dikvi. I will say, such a muster. We have to be so careful in life to not discount the nisi dikvi. Life is filled with constant, embedded, consistent, ongoing miracles. And because we see them day in and day out, we forget that they're miracles. Because we see them day in and day out, because they're kivi'i, we forget about how great they are. We need to make sure, I will say, that we never lose sight of our miracles, not just the episodic ones, but the constant, consistent ones as well. The Gemara says, so we'll say, now remember again, one of the miracles that was quoted was that the smoke of the ma'aracha, we'll say the ma'aracha is the pyre. Remember again, there was a wood pyre in the Mizbeach. The smoke ascended in a straight column. So the Gemara says, was there smoke from the Ma'aracha? Was there smoke from the fire in the Mizbeach? V'atanya, we learn, there were 5 things which were said about the fire of the Ma'aracha. Revutza kari. We'll say number 1, this is incredible. The fire itself took on the appearance of a crouching lion. Ubara kechama. The fire itself was as clear or as luminescent as the sun. V'yesh ba mamish. The fire itself had mamashas, or was it right? Had a what's the word? Was it a consistency? Substance. All right, I was going to say a substance to it. And the fire was so powerful that it could consume liquids the same way it consumed solids. Ve'eno ma'ale ashan. And it did not give off smoke. So you just told me one of the miracles was that what? Was that ultimately, again, the smoke went up. Now we're saying that one of the miracles of the Ma'aracha, fire of the Ma'aracha, is that it didn't give off smoke. To which the Gemara says, no. Ki ka'aminon b'dehedyot. Both say, remember again, this is incredible. There were two fires on the Mizbeach. There was the Ishtamid, the fire that came down from the heavens, and then there was the fire that the Kohanim were obligated to burn. So the fire that came down from Shemayim, that fire did not generate any smoke. But the fire that the Kohanim had to make, that was an obligation day in and day out, that fire produced smoke. And it's about that smoke that the Mishnah said one of the miracles was the smoke went up in a straight pillar and did not dissipate. So the Gemara says, Desanya, V'nasnu b'nei Aaron HaKohen ish al Mizbeach, even though it was a fire that came down from the heavens, mitzvah lahavi min hahedjot. There was a mitzvah for the Kohanim to kindle their own fire each and every day. Revut sekari. So we'll say the Gemara says the fire Right, the fire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu was crouching like a lion. V'atanya, Amr Rabbi Chanina, Skana Kohanim, Aniri Isi. Rabbi Chanina, Skana Kohanim said, I saw that fire, Uravutza Kikelev, and the fire was crouching like a dog. So which one is it? Is like a lion, like a dog? Lo kasha, Kama Mikdash Rishon, Kama Mikdash Sheni. I will say, in the first Beis HaMikdash, the fire that came down from Shamayim ultimately was crouching like a lion, representing the prowess of the Bayis Rishon. The fire that came down in Bayis Sheni was like a dog, still powerful, but not like a lion. One second, Mikdash Sheni Mihavi. Was there a fire that came down from the heavens in the second Beis HaMikdash? V'amar Shmuel Bar Inei, Mai Dechsiv, the Erzaba ve'ichabda, or ve'ikabed ve'karinan ve'ichabda, Mai Shal B'chosei. So we'll say the word ikabed is missing a hey. We read Ichabda to teach us that there are 5 things, the Mechusar hey, there are 5 things that were different, 5 things missing from Bayis Rishon to Bayis Sheni. And what were those 5 things? Elu Chameshes, Dvarim Shaiba Mikdash Rishon, Mikdash Sheni. The Elohein, here are the 5 things. Aron v'Kapores, or Aron v'Kapores Akruvim, that's all one. Right? There was no Aron, there was no ark, which meant there was no lid, there were no Kruvim, that was missing, that's all one though. Eish, no fire came down from the heavens. Ushchina, the divine presence did not rest in the Bayis Sheni as it did in Bayis Rishon. Ruach HaKodesh, no spirit of prophecy. Ve'urim v'tumim. And there was no Urim v'tumim, I will say. Remember again, the Urim v'tumim is the piece of parchment with the 72 ineffable letter, 72 letter ineffable name of Hashem that was slid into a fold into the Choshen and kind of acted as the battery, the spiritual battery for the Choshen. That you were able to ask the Choshen questions and the Rebbe Shalom would respond through the Choshen. That was not present in the Bayis Sheni. So the Gemara says, Amri in miyahava siyui lohava Messiah. So we'll say this is very interesting. So the fire was there even in the second Beis HaMikdash. There was fire, but amazingly enough, the fire that came down from the heavens did not assist in consuming the karbanos. So I'll say, isn't this incredible? So the fire was there. This is incredible. The fire did come down even in Bayis Sheni. But unlike in Bayis Rishon, where the fire would come down and consume the karbanos, the fire came down in Bayis Sheni, but did not consume the karbanos. It's incredible. And I just want to point out, Tosas brings down over here, how can you say that there are no Urim v'tumim in the Bayis Sheni? Look at Tosas just a moment. Urim v'tumim havu. So again, Tosas says, Shimlo kain hada kohen gadol mechusar begadim. How can you say there were no Urim v'tumim in the second Beis HaMikdash? Because we'll say if there's no Urim v'tumim, that means we'll say that the kohen gadol was missing some of his begadim. Well, the kohen gadol who's mechusar begadim can't do the avoda. Therefore, Tosas says they were there. Ella lo hayu mashivin l'nishal. So we'll say Tosas says they know the Urim v'tumim were present. They just what? Didn't work. It wasn't working. We'll say it was there. So we'll say it's machlokes Rashi Tosas. Rashi understands there were no Urim v'tumim in the second Beis HaMikdash, which means refer that piece of parchment, which is the pasha pshat in the Gemara. Tosas says impossible because then the kohen gadol will be mechusar begadim. It was there. Cheshbach Baruch Hu just didn't answer. Tana Abanon. Sheish Eshos. And I will say there are 6, the Gemara says now, there are 6 fires. Yesh Shocheles Ve'ino Shosa. So I will say there's a fire that eats but doesn't drink, which means it consumes solids but not liquids. Yesh Shosa Ve'ino Ocheles, a fire that drinks but doesn't eat. Yesh Ocheles V'Shosa, a fire that eats and drinks. Yesh Ocheles Lachenu Kiyavation, a fire that consumes liquids like it does solids. There's one fire that repels another fire. There's a fire that consumes other fires. Let's go through the list. There's a fire that eats but doesn't drink. Hadidan. We'll say that's our fire, right? Our fire could consume things, but yet can't consume liquids, right? It could be put out by liquids. What's a fire that drinks but doesn't eat? Decholin. This is incredible. This is the fire of fever, right? Rabbi, so when a person is feverish, what happens? They want to drink, but often they have no appetite. So the fire drinks but doesn't eat. Ocheles v'shosa, a fire that eats and drinks. The Elio, the Chsiv, the Esamayim Hashabatal Lachka. So we'll say this refers to the episode of Elio Hanavi and his theological showdown with the Nevi Habal and Hara Carmel. Remember again, there was Elio Hanavi challenged Nevi Habal to whoever could go ahead and bring down a fire from the heavens first will assert theological supremacy. What does Eliyahu Navi do? He shechs karbanos, puts them on a pyre, and soaks the whole thing with water. So the fire came down and not only consumed the karbanos, but consumed the water as well. A fire that consumes wet things like dry things, that refers ultimately again to the fire that came down on the Mizbech and the Beis HaMikdash. Yesh ish docha ish. There's a fire that repels fire. Di Gavriel. This refers to the fire of Gavriel. So we saw this actually referenced in Psachim. Remember what happened in Psachim? So that's when Gavriel, the Malach Gavriel, came down to save Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah from the fiery furnace. He came down and he repelled the fire from the inside, and the fire consumed everyone outside of the furnace. There's a fire that consumes fire, the Shechina. This refers to the fire of the Ribono Shel Olam. Damar Mar, Hoshit Etzbo B'nei V'Safar. So Rashi points out, this is a reference to Cheshbon was ready to create man. There were a group of malachim who argued against the creation of man. What did HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? He put his finger right in the midst of them and he consumed them. Malachim are fire. Yet the fire of the Ribono Shel Olam consumed the fire of the malachim. Incredible. And I will say when it came to the fire of the smoke with the ma'aracha, all of the winds in the world could not move it. So that was the miracle. That the smoke would ascend in a straight pillar, and no matter how windy it was, it wouldn't move. Listen to this. Is that true? That the pillar never moved? But listen to this. This is incredible. So Rav Yitzchak Bar Avdimi said, right after Shmini Atzeres, Hakol Tzolfin Lashon HaMarachon. Remember again, Matzei Shmini Atzeres is the beginning of the rainy season, right? That's the rainy season after Sukkot. Everybody would look to see what would happen with the Ashon of the Ma'aracha. So I'll say essentially what the Gemara is going to say is they were looking to see which way the wind would blow. Listen to this. Nota klapet safon. So if the pillar of smoke would blow towards the north, so the paupers were happy, and the balabatim, the merchants, were very sad. Why? Because it will say, what would that represent? That meant there was going to be a lot of rain that year. So what does that mean? When there's a lot of rain, there's an overabundance of produce. When there's an overabundance of produce rots. Therefore, what do you have to do? You have to sell cheap in order to get rid of your inventory. So who's happy about selling cheap? The paupers are happy, the merchants were not happy. Not a klapi darum. If the pillar of smoke shifted towards the south, that meant there would be less rain. So the paupers were sad because that meant there'd be less produce, higher prices. The paupers were sad, the merchants were happy. Not a klapi mizrach. If the pillar of smoke shifted or slanted towards the east, Hakol Smechin, everybody was happy because it will say if the east meant there would be just enough rain, so there'd be enough produce, but so that you wouldn't have to sell it at a premium, but also wouldn't also have to sell it cheap. So the merchants would make their money, and the aniyim would have ample supply. The Gemara says, Klape Marav, but if the pillar of smoke slanted west, Hakolat Savin, everybody would be sad because it will say that would mean there would be insufficient rainfall. And therefore, they weren't happy enough produce. Now, again, what do you see from here? That the pillar of smoke did shift directionally. So why do you tell me that it didn't shift directionally? Tushimar says, no. Da'azil va'asi kidikli va'avdure lo hava mivdar. But say what it means was, the pillar itself would shift, but would not dissipate. So the Gemara says like a palm tree. I say, what does a palm tree do when it's windy? It shifts back and forth, but the palm itself is intact. So too again, the pillar itself would never dissipate. The pillar remained intact. Just when the wind blew, the wind would shift the pillar, but it was an intact pillar. I will say incredible. So the Gemara goes right there. The Gemara says, Amar, Klapi Mizrach Hakol Smechin, Klapi Marav Hakol Atzavin. So the Gemara just said before that when the wind blew towards the east, everyone was happy. Towards the west, everyone was sad. Or Minu. The Gemara says, 1 second, Mizrach is the Olam Yafa, Ma'arav is the Olam Kosha. Here, we learned that ultimately, again, eastern wind is always good, western wind is always difficult. Ruach tzifon is yafa lechitin. A northern wind is good for wheat, So the Gemara says, B'shashev yushlish, as long as the wheat is 1/3 grown, the kashel is asim, and it's difficult for olives. Bisman shein chotin, at the time when they're beginning to blossom. V'ruach duromis, a western wind, kashel lechitin b'shashev yushlish, is difficult for the wheat when it is matured to 1/3 of its growth. V'yafal azesim, but it's good for olives. Bisman shein chotin, when they're blossoming. From Rav Yosef Yitem Amar Zotra, Visim Achwase, how do you remember all of this? This is incredible. Visim Manach, how do you remember it? Shulchan b'tzafon u'menorah b'daram. I will say the shulchan was in the north, and the menorah was in the south. So I will say, what does that mean? A northern wind is good for the wheat. Wheat makes bread which goes on the shulchan. And the western wind is good for olives, which ultimately again are used for the menorah. So the Gemara says, so again, the winds of the north, the winds of the south, each go ahead and perpetuate that which works for that which goes on it. So I will say, so again, it's an interesting way to remember it. So the east, right, the menorah, which is in the north, ultimately again, northern winds take care of the wheat. The shulchan, which was in, good. That's the shulchan, in the north. The menorah, which is in the south, the southern winds take care of the olives. So both say, so you see a contradiction, to which the Gemara said, Lokasha, halan, v'halahu. Both say it's not a contradiction. There's a difference between which winds were good for Eretz Yisrael and which winds were good for Bavel. Take a look at the last Rashi. Halan, v'halahu, truly beautiful. Rashi says, Mizrachis, yafal Eretz Yisrael. The Eretz Bavel. Eastern winds were good for Bavel. Why? She eretz lacha, because Bavel in general was a more humid, had a lot more rain. The earth was moister. Machmas memeha liolam uli Eretz Yisrael kasha. But yet that same easterly wind was difficult for Eretz Yisrael. She eretz hamayim because of maris liyavesh. So say all the Gemara says is that this whole discussion about winds depends on where you're living. Ultimately, again, some winds are good for Eretz Yisrael, some winds are good for Bavel. Not a contradiction. I will say I'll just end off with one last piece. With this, we'll conclude. Remember, the first miracle we started with in this discussion was the first of the 10 miracles was Omdin, Tzefufim, Mishtachavim, Revachim. Right? So again, when they would stand in the Beis HaMikdash, whether it's the Regalim, Yom Kippur, they would stand shoulder to shoulder, and when they would bow down, there would be room for everyone. So the Kotzker says something incredibly beautiful. He says, this is not just the din in the Beis HaMikdash, it's a din in life. He says, Omdin, there are some people who always stand their ground. Some people who always have to be right. Some people that are always omed. It's my way. It's my way. It's got to be my way. We'll say, what happens when you're always an omed? What happens when you always stand your ground? When you always draw your line in the sand? Tzefufim. There's no room for anyone else in life. There's no room. There's no room. We all know people like that. Some of us are people like that. And what happens? Right? It's impossible to coexist with people like that. When you're always right and it always has to be your way, you leave no room for anyone else. But mishtachavim, when you learn to yield, we'll see, there are sometimes you have to draw your line in the sand, and there are some times that you have to be unyielding, but the truth is those times are few and far between. Mishtachavim, when you learn to yield, revachim, suddenly again there's room for everyone. Know when to be an omed, know when to stand your ground, but those times are few and far between, and know when you do so, you will stifle those around you. But mishtachavim, find the koach to yield, and amazingly enough, there's room for everyone. See, Rabbi said the miracles of the Beis HaMikdash were not just miracles for temple service, but they are miracles ultimately that taught us how to live our lives. Halavai, we should be zochem Eretz Hashem to see those miracles and learn from those miracles. Again, here, Rabbi Yameinu. Amen. Hadron alach shivas yamim. Rabbi say shkoyach mazel tov. Tomorrow we begin the new parak. Shkoyach.